Hi, this is Calvin Castine, and we're coming to you from the village office. It's the, I believe, 11th day of March, 2013, and we're here because on the, I think it's the 19th,
Yes.
8 days from now, a very important vote is going to take place within the village of Champlain, and that is whether or not to dissolve the village. And if it's a yes vote, then things will proceed, and there will be a chance for people to respond to that, and there's also the possibility of a second vote, but we'll probably get into that as we move along in this. I have with me Kevin Triller, who's started the petition to dissolve the village, and on my right is the mayor of the village of Champlain, Greg Martin. And before I ask you guys to talk about when you first arrived here in the beautiful downtown Champlain, I started thinking this morning of my memories of this village. I've never lived in the village, but I did spend 12 years here at St. Mary's and 9 years working at the Sheridan Company, Harris Graphics. I remember when Elm Street and Perry's Mills Road were known as Route 11, and the traffic would come down and merge with Route 9 in front of what was then the Champlain Hotel. And Route 9 was the only north-south route. There was no interstate highway at that point in time. So it was a very, very busy period when you have all Route 11 and all the north-south traffic coming through the village of Champlain. I remember going to St. Mary's, and the convent was attached to the school, and the convent was filled with nuns and boarders from Canada and South America. I remember before the athletic field was put in the late 1950s, and there was a hill that came down from Pine Street onto Cedar Street. I remember walking past when the phone company was on the end of Spruce Street, and walking into this building right here back in fall of 1957. You know, with Wayne Burrell and Norman Ashline, and we looked at the brand new 1958 Chevys that were coming out. And that was Tremblay's garage here, Snut Tremblay, Leon Tremblay, and that was right here where the village office is located. I remember the little hot dog stand that was around the corner there, that was run by Richard Olina. I remember the Western Auto, Jimmy Chevalier's, Elmer Lucas's, Coonan's Garage, Bob Greenberg's Hardware, the American House, B. Bodette's Cheeseburgers at the Central Tavern, which our camera person Judy can fully attest to. And that was, of course, located to Paquette's Insurance. Remember the Grand Union, the AMP, and the IGA, all located downtown, along with the American Legion and the post office. I got my hair cut at Burt Furnier's and Edmund Malone's. I remember Orville Dunn's law office, Kaufman's store, Pearl's department store, buying baseball cards at Margaret Seneco's variety store, and comic books from Falcon's drugstore and the candy cupboard. Listening to the new band called the Beatles at Babby's restaurant and in the morning, and in Ma Doopy's in the afternoon. I remember Bob Dumont and his meat locker. And Kevin, you were there when that meat locker came down, and thanks to Kevin, we have footage of that dramatic scene when all that brick building came tumbling down. So I remember that when that was Bob Dumont's and the meat locker. I remember when the Methodist Church was still next door. I remember when the Champlain Central School was so overcrowded that their 6th grade was located at the Grange Hall in Champlain. I remember Smiley Willett and the Sunset Ramblers having block dances in front of the old fire station in the village office at the end of Church Street. I remember Anktill's Bakery, Harvey Rivers gas station, Adrian LaFountain's gas station. My father dickering with Raymond Spitter Bedard and getting things welded at Bert LaFountain's in the French Village. I've had my picture taken by Ralph Stone, my clothes cleaned by the laundry when Cliff LaPlante was still in charge. I remember the milk plant and the GLF, and when Leslie Burrell took over that little service station now owned by Bruce LeClaire. I saw movies at the new Lyceum Theater. I remember when the bank was located at Celine Paquette's museum, and there was a bowling alley across the street. I remember when the Rutland Railroad still came through Champlain. I had friends and schoolmates who grew up on River Street. And as Greg, as you very well know, there's only 2 houses left on River Street. I remember the Savoy Hotel, and when the former Champlain Elementary School building, which we now call the Champlain Elementary School building, was Champlain Central, and it housed all 12 grades except for a one-room school in Perry's Mills. I sat in Ma Doopy's in 1966 watching the aftermath of the fire that was what is now Paquette Park. I took pictures for the North Countryman following the fire that destroyed the other part of downtown in the early to mid 1970s. And I've covered the floods and closing of Harris Graphics and the sale of their buildings that brought the assessed value from $8 million to $750,000. And I fondly remember Floyd LaFountain pulling his little red wagon through the tree-lined streets of the village. So since Kevin's going to talk first, I'm going to introduce you first, Greg.
Okay.
I first ran into Greg, probably latter part of the 80s. You were coaching at Northeastern Clinton. Coaching softball, then later on basketball. Tell us where you're from and how you got here.
Well, I'm originally from downstate. I moved to Plattsburgh, go to school, Plattsburgh State University. I was given a position at Northeastern Clinton Central School and retired from there about 4 years ago after 32 years. I coached, taught for a long time, made a lot of friends, moved into the village. In fact, I live in John Zerlo's old house. We moved here in 1985. And about 8 years ago, I guess, I've been mayor for 2.5 years. I've been a trustee for another 4.5. I used to watch Hometown Cable. Well, no, back then, I had people that would come to school and say, "Are you watching the village board meetings?" And I said, no. I was embarrassed, but I said no. And I watched the board meetings and saw how difficult it was. And people were saying, it's really messed up there. So a bunch of us, by chance, all got together. We all came to the same meeting, and we all ran for office at the same time. Kim Trombley, Amy was on the board, Jeff was on the board at the time, Steve Southwick, myself, and we ran for the board. We won election, and we have, some of us are still on the board. The village has moved on. We're very proud of what we've done from a financial standpoint. When we first came aboard, the village was in pretty poor financial shape. A couple of years ago, we had an audit. It's called an at-risk audit. So did the village of Rouse's Point. So did the town of Champlain. An at-risk audit is to come in, look at the books, and to see if there's a financial situation that the state controller's office needs to come back in and do a full audit. Well, we were the only one of the 3 entities that did not need a full audit. In fact, the auditor complimented us on what we have done over the last 5 or 6 years here in the village. From a financial setup, the village is very good. I like being mayor, although I'm running for re-election, and I hadn't planned on that. I had told my wife I was not going to run for re-election again. There were some things that I wanted to do. And then the dissolution issue, as the right of any citizen has to deal with this form of government. So I decided I would run one more term, see the dissolution one way or the other through. I felt I owed that to the village residents, and we will see where it goes from here.
All right, that's a 2-year term, is it?
It is a 2-year term.
And just to clarify, he lives in John Zerlo Sr.'s house.
Yes.
Not John Zerlo Jr.'s.
Well, John Zerlo Jr. was brought up there.
Right.
In fact, there's a burn spot in the middle of my wooden floor where John lit a little fire when he was a kid. I probably shouldn't be telling you.
No, you shouldn't be telling that. That's the county clerk. All right, Kevin Triller, who are you? Where'd you come from, and when did you come to the village?
Well, I came to the village in 1989, probably a few months early before buying the property. I bought the old Gerard Fillion dairy farm, the remaining portion of the property surrounding 8 acres, parts in the village and parts in the town, houses in the village. I since retired. I worked up here with New York State Police for 23 years as a trooper and investigator. I worked the roads here, the village, the town, the adjoining towns, the adjoining counties for 23 years. So I got a pretty good feel for what's here, who's here, what's coming, what's going. I can't even begin to touch your list. but I'm glad that you went, I'm glad that you went through it to show how multiplicious it is and how many things are gone. I haven't seen that much come and go, but in my, say, 20-some odd years, I've seen a lot of good, a lot of changes and a lot of good things leave. I'd say I stayed up here. I'm now retired. I tore the existing farm down, built some new barns, currently raising sheep, got a couple alpacas, got lots of lambs for sale, and a couple horses.
Free ad.
Yeah, and a couple horses I'd be more than willing to give away. That's pretty much it, and I'm retired and settled in.
All right, where are you from originally? He
Wow.
only admitted to downstate.
Well,
That's like saying upstate in New York City.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in Champlain, everything is
that's
downstate.
right, yeah. Southern tier,
Altona is downstate.
that's true.
From
That's true.
as far back as I can remember, lived down in Loudonville, which at the time was a rural area, much like the town of Champlain. You can't recognize anything now down in that area. Everything is so grown up. Grandparents' house and properties are the current Siena College. The family home was moved off the hill where the Siena College chapel is. It moved about a mile down the road. Got pictures of 2 or 3 Model T type vehicles towing it, along with a couple teams of horses moving the house. We moved to Clifton Park, again, before that was what it is now. Bought a farm there and raised and grew up there. Worked for a sheep farmer, dairy farmers. Went on to school. Went on to 31 years of Air Force, including active and reserve time. Left Plattsburgh Air Force Base in '86 to join New York State Police, and here I am, still up in the North Country.
All right. I'd like to welcome you guys, both of you
Thank
guys.
you.
to the North Country. Excuse me for waiting so long. Okay, what we're gonna do is, Kevin's gonna go first and say why he started this petition to dissolve the village, and Greg will be taking notes, plus he's got his, other things he wants to say already prepared, but if there's something that he might have a disagreement with or wants to clarify, he'll do that. So we're trying to give each person their chance to talk, kind of interrupted. The only person who's allowed to interrupt will be me, but mainly it'll be if I need a clarification or something else to kind of speed things along. We're trying to keep people watching this. So Kevin, it's all yours.
Okay, bear with me. I tried to put together a topic outlined in notes, much like Calvin has. In the spring of 2010, I was approached by other villagers who had much longer tenure than I had, probably equal to Calvin's. After lengthy talks with them and conducting research, internet, and assessing what I knew, I had approached Mr. Martin and the village board and asked them to initiate the dissolution process, where they declined. I started a petition to dissolve the village in 2010. I started collecting names and again reapproached Mr. Martin and the board a second time. Again, they declined. I continued to obtain signatures with the help of other village residents. In 2012, I approached the board once more and asked them to initiate the dissolution process. They declined. On December 10th, I submitted the petition that's currently before the board that has initiated the dissolution process. It started the clock running, and up now on the 19th of March, the registered village voters will have the opportunity to decide if they want to continue the process to dissolve the village. That will be taken with a yes vote. Once that process starts, it will continue. A second vote is possible. A no vote will stop the process on the 19th, and that process cannot be reinitiated for 4 years. I personally feel that the complexity of closing the village has been overstated, convoluted, and dramatized. The tactics, particularly with a lot of what ifs, have helped to confuse many of the villagers. In considering the dissolution for the village, the dissolution process, I feel, is a secondary issue. The reason we need to close the village is a primary issue. A lot of it's economics. We don't need a village board as a governing body to control and regulate a mere 553 households that's based on census information and a handful of small businesses. The village, as Calvin stated, and I'm going to skip a lot of this because he hit more highlights than I could ever based on his personal knowledge. But but we've lost homes, families, businesses, attractions, and schools, and we're in a slump. It's the time, it's the economic times, and it's also our future. Before coming here, I did an internet search for attractions for the village of Champlain. I was flabbergasted, I was amazed. The three, with number one, was the sewage treatment plant. The second, the fire department, and the third, the library. The former St. Mary's School had been taken off the list. When we look back to see where we've been the last couple hundred years, it's quite obvious there's no current need for the village to be maintained as a governed body, taking our monies in the form of additional taxes. Yet the town was formed in 1788, 85 years before the village. Now I'm getting into some of Calvin's timeframes. Where the village is now located, I was really surprised to find was a part of Canada up until 1763, and didn't become a part of the United States until 1783, 90 years later. The town of Champlain, when it was first formed, combined the town of Champlain, Chazy, Altona, Moores, Clinton, Ellenburg, Chateauguay, Burke, Constable, Belmont, and Bangor. That's what the town of Champlain started with. It also included the present village of Malone, which is now Franklin County, and also included our village. Again, changes took place over the course of the next 12 years, and most of that went away. Chateauguay, Ellenburg, Chazy, Altona, Moores, Clinton, and Malone reduced the size of the current town to what it is right now. The Chazy River and its water power is what brought a lot of people here to the village. The Chazy River was navigable up into the village from the lake. Later, the Civil War era and Abraham Lincoln, working the railroad, developed the railroads here. 1862 news media shows that this village grew to such importance with the completion of the railroad, and it had the largest freight depots and structures in the state of New York. The village was the seat of the Champlain Academy, 2 foundries, one of them for the manufacturing of railroad car wheels, linen factory, planing mill, carriage factory, several stores, an excellent hotel, and telegraph companies. Again, I think it's going to precede some of your time frames. It said that we were an important rail station on the Ogdensburg Railroad, and the major commodities coming back and forth was first lumber, then iron ore. We went through the process, and again, predating Calvin, we had a couple of brickyards, the Finley Iron Works, then on to the Sheridan, the ski factory. I think you missed that. Harris Graphics, the bindery, Kimpex, now the Soucy buildings, which are Canadian owned, and quite depreciated in their taxable value. The 1862 description of our village mirrors what John Southwick aired in the Champlain, or the Press Republican, of his memories of 65 years here. But again, it can't even, his list didn't compare to what Calvin was. Do you want to take a swap, or happy to continue? Or?
Okay, well, I think we got an idea what the village was.
Okay.
Do you think you've stated why you want to dissolve it?
No, the whys are coming.
Okay.
The whys are coming. So that's pretty much what the village was. And I mean, history has got every bit of that documented.
Yeah, the only point I'd make was that from what I've seen when the French and Indian War ended in the 1760s, all of this, not just the village, but as far into Essex County, was considered to be part of Canada by the French, and it wasn't until around the time that we started the Revolutionary War that we decided that these were the boundaries. And in 1788, you mentioned all the stuff west of us, but New York State also thought that Alberg and Isle of Mont were part of New York State at the time, because the state of Vermont was a republic, and they disputed that. So, the town was bigger, but it was all frontier, you know. It wasn't a thriving town in 1788. It wasn't, you know.
Okay. Taking a look at what we have now, the village has no visual remains of the railroad. The Chazy River won't float a boat up the river. We have no current use for water power. The 100-year floods are now a common reoccurring basis. The flooding's wiped out the lower part of the village. FEMA's prevented rebuilding the flood area. Flood insurance makes even living close to the river too costly. Historic buildings have been reduced to ruins by fire, flood, and abandonment. Our village is laced with abandoned properties. There's for sale signs on almost every street in the village, and if you look at real estate listings, there's multiple foreclosures pending. Real estate prices are down. Property owners are having to sell their property below value to make a sale. Fixed income property owners are scared of rising taxes and declining values. Abandoned properties are becoming the responsibility of the village to tear down. We recently saw with the St. Mary's School, also known as the old meat locker. An empty lot or an abandoned structures in need of demolition is just another burden on the taxpayers. You can ask yourself, who wants to live next to any of these sites? Who would want to build next to any of these sites? The abandoned properties put us all at risk. The impending collapse or the potential for fires, placing our firemen and our EMS in harm's way. They also have the potential of taking out the telephone and electric grids along with our entire 9/11 system.
Okay, I want to interrupt you.
Yep.
But all these things will continue whether it's a village or a town, right?
That's correct.
The only difference is, as far as the tax burden of tearing down buildings, that would be shared by more people. But I mean, as far as these things that you're saying right here now, whether it's a village or a town, that will still...
That's correct, but I guess in my closing, I'll pretty much give that in a summary.
Okay.
The village board's begun targeting the properties for possible demolition and cost of repairs. We've had no recent development in the village and no new homes. We've recently lost the second of our 2 schools and the only barber shop. We now maintain a single bar and a small closed boutique in the downtown area. There's basically nothing left in the village, which gets to my point. Based on the things that have gone, we don't need to be micromanaged by a village government. The village debt is almost paid off. We've got 2 bond payments left. The abundance of cash flow on hand, which came from tax money out of our pockets, is almost sufficient to close off all remaining debt. Village-owned properties and holdings are available for public sale, can be liquidated or negotiated with the town during dissolution. Village trucks, equipment, and other assets are also up for negotiation with the town or public sale. The water and sewer plant will need to be assumed by the town or have a separate district created. There's nothing the town won't be able to do for us. The plows that pass by may have a different seal on the door. You may or may not recognize the driver. The remaining sidewalks and streetlights can be either maintained or eliminated. Villagers will be eligible to run for town positions. Plowing a road, fixing a pipe, paving a street are no-brainers. The village DPW crew does not have a monopoly on these tasks. The town's been operating for almost 100 years longer than the village. The town's population is 5 times larger than the village. The town occupies 50 times more property than the village. The village only occupies 1.5 square miles, with a portion of that covered by water. The census reflecting 553 households. The town's got, again, 5 times that, 2,500. Town hall's 5 minutes away, the village hall is a minute away. Again, there's no brainers here. It's not as if the town can't assume the duties and responsibilities. Again, I think the hardest thing here is that the town hasn't had a history of maintaining a water or a sewer system, and that'll take trained employees, which can include the employees coming from the village. The dissolution process will take effort and time. Grant funds are available. The mayor has set aside money already in this current budget to start the dissolution study based on my efforts to petition the village for the dissolution. And my bottom line is the village's solution is dissolution. So, thank you.
Okay, and your figures for the 5 times the population, you're including the both villages in those total figures, right?
Based on what I could pull up quickly, that's an assumption. It
Yeah, I mean, it's
wasn't-
including both villages.
Well, no, because when you broke down, it showed 553 villages, 553 households in the village, and then independently it broke down 2,500. I didn't look at Rouse's Point figures.
Okay,
The village has about 1,300. Rouse's Point has about 2,500, and I think there's a
People.
total.
People.
People, yeah. I think
Which
there's-
includes children.
Yes. Yeah.
But it boils down to in the village about, there's an estimated 550 voters in this village, which is estimated to be 1 per household.
which is surprising, only 1 voter per household?
Well, yeah.
All right, Greg?
Well, in my travels around the village, what I found is the village residents like the idea that they have a close local government. By taking away a local government here, which is very cost effective, we're not paid a whole lot. We don't get paid a whole lot for this job, but we enjoy what we do for the people. People so far have been very responsive, at least the ones that I've talked to, going around with my petitions or just going around and talking to them the last month or so. When you remove a layer of government, or you move government that is closest to the people feel that loss. And it is, I mean, it's when people have water problems, or they have wastewater problems, or they have, an issue with a clogged drain here or there, they call the village office and they expect to have immediate response, and we try to provide that. We have the expertise in doing water main breaks and fixing water mains. In fact, many times, the greatest wait time is when we have to wait for DigSafe to send a representative to mark out the gas lines and power lines, etc., before we can go ahead and fix this break. As far as taxes go, we learned last Thursday at a public meeting that the taxes, if you dissolve the village, the taxes is going to be approximately the same. The town tax may be a little bit less. One of the factors is we pay the town outside road maintenance fees, which for this village account to about $70,000. And in my mind, we get very little representation for that money. Taxes, a little bit less, but then you have to deal with the services. Here in the village, you have a sidewalk. Is the town going to set up a sidewalk service? Or is it going to make the village residents, or what was the village residents, is it going to make them maintain their own sidewalks? There's a street light district that will have to be set up, a water district, a wastewater district. So all of these, because the whole town is not going to get charged for these districts, it is just simply those that enjoy the service will pay for it. If you look at other areas, in Keysville, if the assessment was $70,000 or less, the Dissolution study showed that those residents were going to pay more in their property taxes. If you look at the study, and it's available to you online, Dissolution of Keysville, you'll also find that the water and wastewater rates for the consumers have gone up. The services. Is the town going to pick up all our services? Is it going to pick up the things that the village DPW crew, and I have a very small crew, there's only a superintendent and 3 workers. They are all very good at what they do, and I'm very proud of them for what they have done here in the village. I know we have some issues downtown. We have some old buildings that are owned by out-of-town or out-of-state or out-of-country owners. They pay their taxes, they pay their water bills. It is, by the code, I can go ask them to take care of their property, but I can't force the issue unless it presents a public safety issue. The floodplain. I wish I could, but I can't stop the river from flooding. The last time, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the river flooded. It took out a water line that goes under the Main Street Bridge. It is causing some pressure issues on that side of the village as well as the border. We are in the process of a water project at the moment with the town of Champlain to address water and wastewater issues here in the village, which includes pressure. It includes the particulates that are in the water. We have some issues with things that build up in the pipes. We're addressing that by flushing out the water tank twice a year, or not twice a year, but once every other year to get rid of some of the sediment. It gives the people a cleaner product. With dissolution, and this election on Tuesday the 19th is very important. Look at the question that's on that ballot. Should the village of Champlain be dissolved? Yes or no? Well, it says nothing about a dissolution study there. It's just, frankly, should it be dissolved? Now, the way this process works, and there's still some confusion out there, and I hope the 2 public meetings help clear some of this up. as Kevin said, if the yes votes win, then the board has 30 days to start a dissolution plan. From that point, we'll have to hire a consultant. The state, Department of State will pay for most of this. You're talking somewhere in the vicinity of $40,000 to $45,000. 30 days, then you have 180 days to develop a dissolution plan, more or less. Once that 180 days program is up, then the village board at some point must accept that plan. That is the confusion that exists in Keysville now. There's some disruption about how this plan is going to be accepted, how it's going to be worked out. And they're kind of a different situation. They have two towns, two counties, so it's going to take some more figuring than what the plan was built to deal with. Once the village board accepts the plan, at that point, dissolution begins. Now you have a strict 45-day window of opportunity where someone can go out and get 25% of the voters in the village of Champlain to sign a petition to force another referendum. The original petition only needed 10%. To go back and expect that 25% of the voters are going to sign a petition to force another referendum is extremely difficult to imagine. At that point, dissolution is almost, I would say, probably 70% certain to occur. There's a difference in this law. This law was written, and it's very difficult. 19A is the law. It is very difficult to deal with. It is slanted towards dissolution. Now I know the downtown area needs some help. I'd be the first to tell you because I stood outside that meat locker on Thanksgiving evening, and I stood outside that old meat locker building on the 22nd of December when it collapsed. I was there every day. I know what it was about. Down in the floodplain, there's very little that we can do. We talked a little bit about before the recording started. There is nothing that I can put in that floodplain that is going to be of permanence. I can't build a building. I can't put a fence. We've had our community garden down there for the last 2 years. We will continue to do that. I wanted to put a basketball court down there. I think we still can with a little bit of negotiation, but that interferes with the absorption of the water, so that is an issue. This village has come a long way in the last 6 or 8 years. Yes, we've lost a lot. We have certainly lost a lot. I think Route 9, when the interstate went through, the amount of traffic on Route 9 greatly diminished, and that led to the downgrading of many of the villages along the way between here and Albany. But what we've done here, from a financial state, from what we offer our villages or villagers, I mean, we have some festivals, we have music night in the park, we have movie night in the park. These are all important get-togethers for village. People from far and wide came and attended those things. The tree lighting down at Paquette Park was very well attended. Even if it was cold, people came down, they had a good time singing the carols. The first night that we had it, it kind of started snowing a little bit. It was a beautiful sight. But to go back, I know there's issues that need to be looked at. As a result of last Thursday's meeting with Mr. Beltramo from the New York State Conference of Mayors, the suggestion came up that the village start a revitalization committee. We used to have a beautification committee here that would welcome new residents when they came in. The suggestion was a revitalization committee to go out and to address the property owners of buildings that need some repair. Again, the village's hands are quite tied in this matter. But a group of citizens can go out and say to the owners, look, we'd like for you to clean up your building, to paint it, to take care of it a little better. Make sure that, when people come through, that they are proud to drive through the village, to see. One of the comments Mr. Beltramo made is that he said, I drove around the village before this meeting. He said, you have some very wonderful, some very beautiful houses in this village. And it shows that the people care about what they have. If dissolution takes place, I don't think that you're going to see a decrease in your taxes. You have to deal with services. You have to deal with, what am I going to do with the employees that are here? Times are hard. The economic realities of this is the unemployment of 5 or 6 employees, to me, is very difficult for me to get any rest with. I also look at the situation where the state of New York has for years, cried poverty here. Well, it would seem to me that, if the state can come up with $45,000 to have a dissolution study, and then turn around and promise the towns that is absorbing these villages a stipend, quite a steep stipend. In the case of the town of Champlain, you're talking somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. This is taxpayer money. It by far outnumbers what we get from the state of New York. You're taking away a local form of government, the closest form of government for its residents. I know the town offices are 3 or 4 miles down the road. I work well with the town. We have some shared services issues that we are working with the town at the moment. Water, wastewater project is one of them. But I also have to look at these people on this board live in this village. We live in this village, we pay our water, we pay our wastewater, we pay our property taxes here in this village. Again, I work well with the town council, the town board, but I have difficulty sitting here saying I would be comfortable with representatives from outside the village setting my tax rates and my water rates and my wastewater rates, making decisions on the districts that will have to be formed here and how much the village residents will be charged. I thank Mr. Triller for mentioning that this village has been handling its debt very, very well. Everything else in this village is owned. We paid for it, you paid for it. It's owned. There's no debt there. We have 2 more payments on the wastewater plant that will be owned by the village residents. 2 payments of $126,000 a year. In the water plant, the loan was due in 2027, I believe. The village treasurer started calling around, found a bank that would accept this debt at an interest rate of half of what the federal government was charging us. What we have done now is we have restructured that debt from 2027 down to 2024. This year we will make a principal and interest payment of $45,000. We have set aside funds to make another principal payment. We figure that we can get that debt paid off by 2022, 2021, and we figure that we have saved the village taxpayers $80,000 by restructuring that debt. We have been very careful with your money. We buy ahead when it is cheaper. We buy in quantities when it is cheaper. We look for outside sources of income. Our wastewater plant is in very good financial shape, partly because outside haulers, private haulers like Morrisonville Septic, use our facility, and we are paid, compensated for that. As I've talked to the people here in the village, they're happy with what they have. They see the village as an identifiable factor. They like saying, I live in the village of Champlain. I like the taxes. Well, nobody likes taxes, but the tax rate. Last year, we were in less than 1% of the taxing entities in New York State. That's cities, that's towns, that's villages, fire departments, EMS, etc. Schools, less than 1% was able to lower their tax rate and give money back to the taxpayers. We were part of that less than 1%. This year, we're working on our budget now. I think we can decrease the budget again So for the first time in a very, very long time, our tax rate will be under $4 a thousand. We have made strides to help the people out. I think the people appreciate it. I think they like what they have with village government and in this village. Very important vote on the 19th. Think long and hard, please. Thank you.
The voting will all be done here at the village office,
Yes, it will, from 12 to 9.
12 to 9 on the 19th, that's a Tuesday.
Yes, it is.
Okay, you mentioned Keysville. We should point out that Keysville is one of the local towns that had a petition similar to what Kevin did, and it passed. And they're now in that phase of coming up with a plan, right?
Yes. Well, the
Yeah.
plan is kind of sort of in place.
Okay.
Now they're fine tuning it.
Okay, then once that plan is in place and the board approves it, then it's a 45-day clock for the public to say, hey, before you go ahead with that plan, we want another vote.
Yes.
Okay, so there's that second overtime type of situation. And Keysville, you know, as you mentioned, is 2 towns, 2 counties. It's a far different situation.
It's going to be very confusing. Yes.
Yeah. Your speaker from a couple nights ago, Beltramo, is that how you pronounce
Yes,
his last
Wade
name?
Beltramo.
Yeah. He did say that he thought that overall, the people in the village, what they spend for the government would go down, and the people outside would probably go up. Any idea why the state, you said you used the figure 300 to 400,000, that state is gonna throw in, why they're so anxious to dissolve?
Well, I guess.
Because you kind of see, when they're throwing that kind of money around, it kind of looks like they're on the side of dissolving it, yeah.
Yeah, and the laws were written by our current governor when he was the Attorney General, and that's no political statement. By dissolving the villages, in theory, you are reducing the taxes. I mean, I talked to a person yesterday who said, look, we pay school taxes, we pay town taxes, we pay village taxes.
And we pay county taxes.
And you pay county taxes. If the village is gone, then that's one less tax that we have to pay. Well, as Mr. Beltramo said, he said maybe it would be better if you kept the villages and dissolved the towns, which would lower your tax rate. Right now, we pay, as I think I said before, we pay the town about $70,000 for outside road maintenance. They don't ask me about this anymore because they know it makes me very angry. It's money that we are paying to the town simply because in town law it says that the town can charge the villages within a road maintenance fee. $70,000, if we could keep that here in the village, obviously that would lower your tax rate. What we are doing is subsidizing the town's maintenance, road maintenance budget. For us, it's about $70,000. For the village of Rouse's Point, you're talking now maybe $110,000, $115,000. So a large part of this, subsidizing the road maintenance, but essentially, what do we get for that tax money?
Well, I know Mr. Beltramo said he was neutral on this, but, you know, listening to him talk, I know, you know, he works for the NICOM and Council of Mayors, and listening to him talk, he wasn't overall neutral in what I was listening to. I live on a county road. The county pays to you know, the La Valley Road is a county road. I think the Mason Road is a county road. We've got Route 9, we've got Route 11. Town doesn't pay to maintain our roads. The county in fact, the county pays the town to do our road.
Yes.
But I've never felt that I shouldn't pay to support clearing the roads. You know, we're not an island here. In order for people to come into the village, for whatever reason they're coming, in order for you to leave the village, you have to use the town, the county, and the state roads. So we're not islands. You know, and I went through this a few years back when Rouse's Point was thinking of becoming a city. We're a community, and there's some things that the community shares, and having roads is one of those, whether they're in your boundary line or not. You know, you can't say I never travel Route 9, so I shouldn't pay state taxes to, you know. So, you know,
Well, there's,
so when Mr. Beltramo threw that out there, I thought that was wrong, because again, I live on a county road, I pay town taxes for the highway maintenance. If we only let the people who live on town roads pay for it, nobody could afford to
that's true.
live on it. So
But
we're a
there's
community
also-
and we share the expense.
Yeah, I like the community aspect, and but I look at what we're paying, and I guess, in effect, what we're getting. But we also have an agreement with the town where we plow some town roads. It works out to be a little over a mile, maybe a mile and a half. Oak Street, East Street, we plow those. And the town still receives the CHIP money for those from New York State, road reconstruction, road management. We have an agreement with the town, kind of informal, but nonetheless, we plow them, and the town in the fall will haul our sand for us. So it works out in both ways. I mean, we help each other out. I mean, the shared services idea is
that to me
a very important aspect of this. And I agree with what you're saying. It just seems like a serious amount of money,
Well, it is, it's definitely.
that we could use here in the village to lower the tax rates.
Okay. All right, we're gonna take a pause right now, and we're gonna sit here and discuss amongst ourselves what we're gonna do next, so stick around, please. All right, we are going to try to wrap this up. What I've asked each of these guys to do is to kind of do a summary of what they think has been said so far, and their feelings on why you should vote yes and why you should vote no. And we won't keep you here much longer. I want to thank Kevin Triller and Greg Martin for agreeing to sit down and do this. I think
Thank you,
it's
Kevin.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we get as much information as possible out there to the voters, because this is a decision that doesn't come along all that often in the course of your lifetime, and it's an important decision. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Triller.
Okay, from listening tentatively to the two gentlemen speak, the thing that strikes me the most is that looking at the village and listening to Mr. Castine and Greg list all the things that have left, we virtually have had nothing come back. In my estimation, there's no return on our investment of the taxes. Our investment is in the village. I say do some math other than playing with taxes and the dissolution to see what we have and what we're going to have. It's a diminishing with no return. To simply try and attempt to, quote, revitalize and clean up the village, that's been tried once already. I believe, I don't know if it was state or federal grant money, but many of the villages, the buildings downtown, a coat of paint was thrown on them. They require far more than paint. Times are hard for taxpayers all over. You know, we don't want to look at another fiscal cliff. Right now the federal government is eliminating billions of dollars in funding, and locally it'll affect us, Border Patrol, our Defense Department, FBI. 20% of their salaries are being scaled back. The economy is failing all over, and not necessarily just in the village of Champlain. Granted, a lot of the village debt is being paid off, and we have the cash capacity on hand to pay off a good part of the remaining debt. I still feel there's nothing that the town could not do that the village is doing. And by eliminating village real estate, village assets, village employees, paid positions, the mayoral position and board members, all these things would diminish our debt. Whether the town be a mile down the road or 5 minutes down the road, we're still part of that community. We are and always have been part of the town. That's not going to go away. It's not as if we're two rival nations warring and one is going to absorb the other. It's not. We're being just absorbed into the larger body of the town, who has far more experience and funds and people available, and we'll just blend in and become part of the town. I guess my bottom line is the solution for the village is simply dissolution. Thank you very much.
All right, Kevin, Greg, final word?
Well, I think keeping government as close to the residents as you possibly can is, I think, is the best way to go. From a financial standpoint, what this village board makes, and again, we're not in this for the, obviously not in this for the money, but what we make as mayor and trustees doesn't even come, well, it's about the same as what the town supervisor is going to get for his yearly salary. You take away that closeness, you take away that sense of belonging, if you will, and I think a lot of people feel and identify with the village of Champlain. There's also the other factors, with the services. What is the future of our employees? We deal with the idea of who's going to pick up these services, who's going to manage these services. I think the village has done an excellent job in dealing with this. Yeah, I agree with Kevin. The revitalization program a few years ago, probably more than that, putting on a coat of red paint and a coat of yellow paint on the buildings really didn't help much, but at least it brightened up Main Street a little bit for a while. I feel the village deserves to go on. I feel it has a lot to offer its residents. I feel that this is from the standpoint of where do we live, I think this offers more in terms of closeness, in terms of neighborhoods. It's not the spread out, it's the more condensed form. I think people enjoy the village services. I think they go out and they see themselves as village residents. It's important, I think, to understand that, we look at a village and we look at what the village offers and we say to ourselves, how can I make it better? Well, people have to get together. People have to sit down and be able to talk. People have to sit down and make plans to move forward. It's very difficult to get people to sit on village boards. It is very difficult for people to sit on town boards. I look at Dissolution. One of the things that I guess kind of sticks out, and we can go through the dissolution plan. We can go through the whole process. We can be absorbed into the town. But the town does not have to follow the dictates of that solution, of that plan. The town can say, that's it. We're not going to do the zoning. We're not going to do the planning stuff. We're not going to fulfill the contracts with the services. This dissolution plan is designed to protect. Sometimes it does, as we've seen in some communities. In the village of Keysville, we spoke about this earlier. There's a lot of confusion down there about services. But be that as it may, I firmly believe that the village is the way to go. I think it's the closest form of government. And I work well with the town government. I'm not saying that they are by any means going to shortchange the village residents, but the closeness of it all is, I think, what really counts here, what really matters. And I think this vote on March 19th, I think it'll show that the village residents really like what they have. I think the no vote is going to win, and I think they want to move this village forward. Economic times are bad all over, but at least we have a chance here to make things a little better. Thank you. I appreciate the effort.
Okay, and I've said the final word, but I will point out that the town already has zoning and planning, so I can't imagine them not going along with the.
They don't have to follow ours.
They don't have to, but I can't foresee that not happening. But that's certainly a possibility. With that,
One last thing, Calvin, for the listening audience.
okay,
They still have time, the villagers who are not registered voters still have time to contact the Clinton County Board of Elections in person. You can do it by mail. I don't know if you can do it by internet. You still have time to register yourself. If you're a village resident, 18 years or older, there's still time to register for this election.
I think you'd have to go down to the Board of Elections.
yeah, but I wouldn't trust the
Wouldn't
mailing back and forth in such a short period of time.
It's on the ground floor, down the hall from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Takes 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you're not already registered, So if you're registered to vote in November, you're registered to vote in the village,
Yep.
in the village here. So don't feel if you've never voted here in the village that you can't do it. If you've registered and you vote in the town and state elections and so on, you're registered. And it's March 19th from
Noon to 9.
noon to 9, right here at the Champlain Village office for people my age, Trombley's Chevrolet dealership.
I bet you'd like that 58 Chevrolet right now, wouldn't you?
Wish they'd bought one.
And how old are you actually?
65. Thanks for